we're going to call ourselves to order for Wednesday, January 17th in the new year, 2024. Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome back. It's going to be 6 o'clock in about 1 minute. I'll start with item number 1, attendance. We're all here. Thank you. And please pay attention to the changes to the agenda. If you need to work on the minutes, C2, the consent agenda rather, or the tip amendments or the Jericho Town approval, you need to speak up now. Jeff?
Yeah, I'd move we take item C2 off the consent agenda and put it on the deliberative agenda.
Okay.
We have to clarify something in it.
Okay, very good. So we're going to remove C2 from the consent agenda and move it to right after the consent agenda. How's that?
That works.
So 3.5. Okay. So any other movements, changes, omission solutions? Okay. Public comment period for items that are not on the agenda. Anyone here from the public would like to speak on a subject? Okay, thank you. So looking for action on the consent agenda. Right now we have C1 and C3, the minor tip amendments, and the Jericho Town Plan approval. I'll need a motion for those. And the MP, I'm sorry, let's do them separately. Is that, or are those both municipal?
Yeah, we should do them separate. So, because there's different voting rules.
Yep.
Chris,
So
can I make a brief comment? Sorry to interrupt there. I just wanted the board to know that the tip amendment consent agenda, they were approved virtually by the TAC. And for the Exit 16 amendment, there was 1 no vote and 13 yes votes, and just wanted the board to be aware of that.
Okay. And who voted no, by the way?
No was local motion.
Okay.
And if you want more detail, I can provide it.
No, thank you. So let's work on C1 or action consent agenda item 3A. Again, this is a municipal planning organization voting. So who votes again? Charlie, remind us the categories.
Yeah, this is an MPO. So it's the municipalities, except for Garrett, sorry, and VTrans. So it's a transportation vote, MPO vote.
Okay.
Chris, I'll move to approve consent item C1.
Second. Thank you, Mike. And thank
second.
you, Andrew. I think Andrew seconded first.
Oh, okay.
It's a mouthful. All right. So all those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
And
Aye.
anyone opposed or abstaining, please speak up. All right. Very good. Now let's move to consent agenda item C3 or 3C, the Jericho Town Plan approval. Are there any notes on that from Taylor or otherwise? All right.
I make a motion to accept the town plan of Jericho.
Thank you, Catherine. And is this a municipal action? So Garrett can second it?
Amen.
All right. Then Garrett came on. Thank you, Garrett. Appreciate it. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
And anyone opposed or abstaining, please speak up. All right. Thank you. All right. We had removed
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Dan, we're just having technical difficulties here. I've got Bruce here on the last 2 motions, so.
Hi, Bruce.
I accept both of the motions.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Yes, I had seen Dan's name in your face. And
What a difference that they make, man.
yeah, there we are. So we're on to the minutes from November 15th, and I think Jeff had some comments on that.
Yes, Amy, on page 7, line 6 through 10. I think on line 7, after regenerating itself, I think I have to make it clear that and say something like the lack of growth in Chittenden County would be to the detriment of the rest of the state of Vermont. That's not clear by what's written there. And that was the point I was making. So I'd suggest we add the lack of growth in Chittenden County would be to the detriment of the rest of the state of Vermont.
And again, would you place us on the page and line number?
Page 7,
Mhm.
row 7, after regenerating itself, semicolon, then say the lack of economic growth in Chittenden County would be to the detriment of the rest of the state.
We must beat the drum to make sure Chittenden County is at the forefront and to ensure that we keep the economy regenerating itself. And then give me the language again.
The lack of economic growth in Chittenden County would be to the detriment of the rest of the state of Vermont. So we insert the lack of economic growth in Chittenden County would be.
Okay. So the this becomes clarified.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments on our minutes from November 15th?
I'd move approval with edits.
With that edit. Thank you. Any second for that?
Well, in case there's other edits, I don't know if there's other edits.
Well, I will wait for those. Anyone else have edits? Garrett, you're looking to second Jeff's approval? Yes? Okay. So we have a motion and a second from Garrett. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Garrett. All those in favor, please raise your hand or say aye. And anyone opposed, please speak up. Thank you.
Chris, I abstain. I was not at the meeting.
Thank you, Jackie. Okay, so, okay, Mike, thank you. Not necessary, but we appreciate it. Item number 4, the public forum for the fiscal year 25 UPWP. So we would like to open the forum. I'll need a motion to open, or Barb, would you like to take over on this?
Sure. Yeah, so a motion to open the forum.
And Garrett's seconding. Thank you.
All right.
So comments or any input on the UPWP, please?
As presented.
I'll just make a brief note. Hi, everyone. Marshall Distel, Senior Transportation Planner, and I manage the annual UPWP process. So while we, encourage members of the public to work directly with their municipalities to assemble UPWP applications, we, hold this annual public forum just to provide an opportunity to hear, directly from anyone who, feels the need to, tell us about any priorities or projects they'd like to see in the region for the upcoming year.
And are there members of the public here?
It looks like there's a hand up from Jeff anyway.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to suggest, Mr. Chair, since we don't have anybody from the public here, is that maybe we leave open the public forum, maybe until around 7:30 when we get close to concluding, in case somebody does show up.
Very good.
And wants to make a comment. But, after seeing none of the really public here, we could move on and take care of our other business in case somebody does show up. We could thoughtfully integrate them into the substantive fabric of our meeting.
Thank you. So we'll leave the forum open and we will check back at intervals to see if somebody's popped in to comment on it.
Chris Bard, a quick question, and it's sort of timely that Jeff makes that comment. Jeff, as sort of a pseudo historian here, any thoughts on past practice? Have we gotten any comments from the public in this forum in the past, ever?
I think we have to break it into pre-COVID versus post-COVID, during COVID and after COVID things. This used to be a very energetic meeting. Over time, I think back, Charlie, in the early stages of your tenure, even before you came, we had to borrow the city of Burlington's light because we had so many witnesses, we had to allocate them to only 2 or 3 minutes. And I don't think we will ever get back to that unless we go back to in-person as a way to do it. And then someone also might argue we do such a good job publicizing it that everybody gets their projects in beforehand, fully developed, working with our staff, and it's become much more efficient and less, something showing up that, at this particular forum.
Yeah, I'll just note, sorry, thanks to Emma for, we advertise in the Free Press and Front Porch Forum, and we let folks know about this public forum, but I do get emailed responses and input from folks. I've got probably, I don't know, a dozen or so far.
I think at one meeting of this, when we were not in our current digs, but over at Kimball Avenue, I think we had like 30 or 40 people show up one time, and we went for like 2 or 3 hours.
Wow.
That's great. Garrett, do you have a thought there? Yeah, go ahead, Garrett. You're muted still.
Exactly. And I was having trouble clicking on a button. I'm only a programmer. Just was wondering procedurally, looking at the agenda, number 5 is the mid-year adjustment budget in UPWP. If we keep the forum open, do we maybe need to also delay number 5?
I'm going to ask
just
Marshall
a question.
Or Charlie.
Yeah, the forum is to get initial input for the 25 work program. So although they're
just making
kind of a similar topic, they're not related in that way. So yeah, we don't need to delay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Garrett. Thanks, Charlie. Joe?
Marshall, I was wondering, out of those 10 or 12 or so emails you got, do you have like general sense, or can you describe what you were hearing, and who were those from in general?
They're all over the map, related to everything from transit to housing to the notion of a exit 16B. So they're all over the place, from all over the county.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, we will summarize those comments for the UPWP committee, and they have their first meeting in 2 weeks, Marshall, I think, or
just checking my calendar.
Right at the end. I will
30th, yes.
And Chris, I don't know. I am seeing 2 names here that I don't immediately recognize, so I'm going to apologize if they are members or alternates. But Patty Davis, are you a member of the public that would like to speak during this period?
I've actually received some email comments from Patty.
Sorry, I gave somebody lots of information, so I'm just here to listen because listen and learn.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. And then Karen Peterson.
Yes. Hi. Sorry, I'm late. I'm just tuning in to see what's happening in your world. Thank you.
Charlie, Karen is Williston's alternate rep.
Oh, that's right. Thank you.
So Andrew was a Williston.
Says Williston Andy.
Yes, I'm still trying to sort out the other Andy. I'll have to go by different names, I guess. Then we have the forum for the UPWP for fiscal year 25 open still. So if the members of the public would like to speak on it, thanks for checking in, Charlie. But we're going to move to the fiscal year 24 mid-year adjustment budget and the UPWP. Do both of those need separate actions, Charlie?
No, that can be one action. Okay. Although, sorry, by separate action, you mean in our bylaws, we talk about an MPO action and an RPC action. So we do need 2 votes on it.
Right.
Yes.
So sorry, for the MPO action, it's the... remind me again, I haven't got this as well. Fuels Gore does not participate, and VTrans does participate. Right. But most of the other, what is it, regional?
Yeah, the regional members also don't have a vote on the MPO actions. So apologies to, I think, just Bruce maybe be the only one of those on right now. And then the RPC action, everybody can vote.
Everybody, okay.
Yeah.
So just to be clear. All right, so let's take them one at a time. I'll need a motion for the mid-year adjustment budget, and that is the RPC one. Is that correct?
Whichever one you want to do first.
Well, that's the one I'm asking. Is that the RPC vote?
They're both voting on the same thing.
Okay, so we need to separately itemize it, and I'm not being very good at figuring out
Two
which way.
votes on the same topic.
Mr. Chair, I'd move that the MPO approve the proposed mid-year adjustment to the FY25 at UPWP.
Thank you, Jeff, for making it clear. And that was Andy. Thank you. Or Andrew of Williston. Thank you. All right. So for the MPO members on that motion, please raise your hand and or say aye. And anyone abstaining or voting negative, please speak up. All right. So moving to the motion for RPC action.
Also move for the RPC.
Thank you, Garrett. And I'll need a second for the
second again.
RPC. Thank you, Andrew of Wilson. And all those in favor, please say aye and or raise your hand. And those who are abstaining or in negative, please speak up.
Okay. And maybe for Bruce's benefit and some of the other people, the MPO has a weighted vote by the community. Not all the communities get one vote. Burlington, for example, gets 4 votes. And that's by federal law.
Thank you.
Super. So I think South Burlington gets 2, and now Essex split apart and gets 1 each for the 2.
Right. We'll be discussing it later. That's not by federal law.
Ah.
Yeah, it is by our bylaws. Say that,
well, yeah, but it's been the tradition going back all the way since the beginning.
True.
And that was approved by the federal authorities.
So that'll be, as Garrett points out, under item 9, where we're talking about our bylaws.
And I'll have some things to bring up at that point.
Great. We're going to move to
I'd be disappointed if you didn't, Garrett.
We'll move to item 6, the health equity project update as part of the ECOS plan. Would that be Taylor?
No, Brian Davis is going to speak to that. It's actually a separate project outside of the ECOS plan.
Thank you. Go ahead, Brian.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you. Thank you for inviting me to present tonight. I am going to share my screen so you can see slides and hopefully keep my face in your window there. All right, how are we looking? Okay. Great. Okay, great. Thanks. So we're going to talk about, excuse me, we're going to talk about health equity tonight and the role that you all and your leaders and commissions can play in your communities to ensure everyone has access to all things health related. Okay, so the Lamoille County Planning Commission received a grant from the Vermont Department of Health to create a health equity toolkit and also to offer assistance to cities and towns to implement health equity where possible. All RPCs statewide, including us, are involved in providing technical assistance to any interested city or town. The Centers for Disease Control states that health equity is achieved when every person has the opportunity to attain their full health potential, and no one is disadvantaged from achieving this potential because of social position or other socially determined circumstances. These could be systemic or structural issues such as social or economic position, education, employment, housing, income, age, or self-determination. With respect to planning, it's ensuring that we're treating people of all races, cultures, and incomes fairly with respect to the implementation, adoption, and enforcement of policies that determine how healthy or unhealthy places are. Health equity and health inequities can be reflected in differences in length of life, quality of life, rates of disease, disability and death, severity of disease, and access to treatment. So again, all the RPCs statewide work together to create this health equity toolkit. as well as a companion resource guide that describes the relationship between planning and health equity, the necessity of planning for health equity, and to provide examples of actions communities can take to ensure that health equity is achieved. You can find the toolkit and resource guide on the RPC's Health and Equity webpage in the resources section. So the goal of this presentation is to share why health equity is important and should be incorporated into planning efforts. It's a shorter overview of a longer presentation that we are available to provide to your community leaders so that they have a solid foundation on which to ground local implementation efforts. So at the end of this, you can let me know if, yes, you want more information, presentation, whatever you want, because we are here for you. So we know that changing the built environment to work for people of all ages, incomes, abilities, and backgrounds is critical to supporting our public health. The built environment is also critical, as we know, for building social capital. The intersection of health equity and planning creates opportunity to reduce negative health outcomes within our communities, creates thriving and vibrant communities where people are engaged, creates space where all types of people want to and can live, opportunity for new and sustained businesses, and also recreation opportunities. Last year, 2023, the Surgeon General released a public advisory that we are all experiencing an epidemic of social isolation and loneliness. So social connection is vital to community health and success. People with strong perceptions of strong social connections are 2.5 times more likely to report good or excellent health compared to people who report having lower perception of social belonging. Get this, social isolation is equivalent to smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. That reflects the big impact of isolation and loneliness on our public health. The Surgeon General's report identifies designing the built environment as a way to promote social community. So all the work that we do as planners in your communities is very important in creating that healthy and equitable future that we desire. This is a graphic from AARP, and it shows the 8 domains of livability. So livability in the built environment looks like a variety of housing types and price points, different transportation choices that factor in all income levels and physical ability, and indoor and outdoor spaces that are accessible for people of all ages and abilities and encourage people to gather and socialize. Physical environments also factor in healthcare to maintain or improve health. Now, livability in the social environment includes community support networks for health services, community and civic engagement, and that social connectedness we desire to create as planners. So with this toolkit and the case study examples, we want to show how infusing health equity into our planning efforts benefits everyone. The curb cut effect, this is one example that illustrates the concept that we're looking for here. So the Americans with Disability Act was passed to ensure that people using mobility devices can safely navigate the built environment. The resulting effect, however, of creating this curb cut is that everyone benefits. Most projects that we work on can and should include an equity lens. Health equity is specifically focused on inclusion around broader health concepts. These concepts can be incorporated into municipal plans and bylaws that support, for example, access to recreational spaces and land uses that support walkability, really accessibility. Social determinants of health, or SDOH, is another way that we can talk about livability and the creation of healthy places. The 5 social determinants of health reflected in the graphic on your left are education access, healthcare access, neighborhood and built environment, social community, and economic stability. The graphic on the right side lists examples of specific implementation tools, including policies, actions, and procedures that can incorporate health equity and address those social determinants of health through municipal planning and governance. All right, let's take a minute here and look at some examples of components of town and village plans that can incorporate health equity. So the text in black represents sample language that can be added to municipal plan objectives within the introduction, let's say. Setting the tone for the whole planning document is helpful to ensure that the text that follows aligns with the overall objective. The equity statements affect public health because of the purpose and influence of town plans. As you all know very well, land use regulations play a role in many ways, including in health equity, because they influence how community plans for local transportation, for recreation opportunities, for medical care and emergency response, food access, safe and affordable housing, access to employment, energy, environmental quality, the whole gamut. So for example, if land use regulations require diverse housing types in all zoning districts, walk-bike infrastructure, employment opportunities, and services in a compact development pattern, then people have the option to use other travel modes instead of just driving. They can also engage with neighbors, they can reach the services they need, and thereby increases everyone's access to a healthy and livable community. Making communities supportive of healthy behavior choices, such as making them more walkable, bikeable, safer, multi-unit housing options, and so on, can be particularly impactful for historically marginalized populations. The benefits include healthier and more productive residents, more renters becoming homeowners, more affordable housing, and more community stability and prosperity. I want to point out, however, the purpose of land use zoning districts can vary drastically depending on the municipality. So we want to be sure to include concepts like walkability, multimodal connectivity, recreational choices, focusing on mixed-use development that's accessible and clustered with all housing types. So we want to focus on those. Of course, when we update our bylaws, there is also an opportunity to introduce health equity, incorporate it in different ways that will benefit the community. So here's kind of different ways to share that with your communities, different ways it can be incorporated into your bylaws. And of course, I want to talk about transportation. So within a plan's transportation section, you can add its own specific section that addresses health equity and transportation. Here are some example actions: increasing access to transportation, encouraging multimodal upgrades. Again, we want to be sure we listen to everyone in the community, including underrepresented groups, when we're planning for those transportation changes and updates. Recreation, parks, and green space is another area of planning that can incorporate health equity. The changes that can improve accessibility can include structural changes, relocating services to accessible buildings, providing auxiliary aids, such as audio devices, sign language interpreters for presentations, and delivering services to an alternate site that is accessible. A couple of Vermont-specific examples. Oakledge for All in Burlington is a volunteer initiative to build Vermont's first universally accessible playground, and that just had a grand opening last fall. In addition, there are off-road trail organizations around the state that are updating existing trails and creating new trails that work with adaptive mountain bikes. As a part of the grant from the Department of Health, they're also providing technical assistance support to specific projects across the state, including these in Chittenden County. Milton on the Move is working on an inclusive community center to support numerous community group meetings and events. Winooski Parents and Students is working on a cooperative training and economic development for underrepresented communities in the school bus service industry and fundraising for electric school buses. And Burlington One Day in Vermont is a website where families can find both free and low-cost activities and services, and nonprofits already serving families in Vermont. A short list here of half a dozen other statewide implementation examples. We talked about the town plan revisions, shared green space. We can do sidewalk inventories and walk audits. The last bullet there, converting an old high school into affordable housing. So there's different ways that we can incorporate health equity into the work that we're doing. And a little closer to home with the RPC, and I know Ann Nelson's provided some updates in her presentations here. Some examples of projects that we're working on that do incorporate health equity. We've got this great map viewer that Melanie Needle created. Melanie and Ann Janda also did this climate action plan focus groups. We're doing walk bike master plans, Ecos plan. You've heard a lot about that. And then the last bullet, we have the Equity Advisory Committee, which is still kind of young. And I know Ann Nelson's gone over their top 4 priorities and other great work that they are helping us do. All right, so the next steps for us, we've presented to the Planning Advisory Committee, talked to some different communities about this topic, sharing it with you. Want to make sure that people know about the toolkit, the resources. We're available to come to your community and give this presentation or the longer one. And do want to also recognize Amanda Freshley from Department of Health. She's a healthy communities specialist, and she's been a part of this work too. And she wanted us to share that, her goal is to saturate our communities with healthy opportunities, so the healthy option is the easy option. Now, she collaborates with municipalities and community organizations throughout the county to promote healthy community design, and she's available to be a resource for you all as well. So I will stop sharing. That's the end of my presentation. And happy to answer any questions or pop the URL to the toolkit in the chat, whatever works for you. Garrett, go ahead.
First of all, I really like your lights in the ceiling. Definitely fun. One thing that I didn't really see in here that to me plays a role, and just a quick bit of background, I represent the smallest community in the county and one of the smallest in the state. But I've also lived in mid-sized towns and even Burlington. And one thing that really plays a big role that is hard to quantify and hard to involve in planning, but is crucially important, is the interdependence. My personal experience is that in rural areas, people far better understand how interdependent they are, whether it's chainsawing a tree in the driveway or pulling a stuck car out, whatever. But the same thing happens in bigger towns when you have neighborhoods and the like. And I know you alluded to the built environment, but to me, a really key portion is to promote a feeling of community, whether it be the whole town or a neighborhood or whatever. And I just wanted to toss that out as to me, an important piece of this.
Yeah, I agree. And, we talked a little bit about that social connectedness and creating that sense of community so that we do know who our neighbors are and we're willing to support them and help out. So I appreciate you raising that point. Dana.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I'm finding that our elder population is really important in terms of equity. And I think there's there's equity for our seniors sprinkled throughout this document, which is great, but it's not really pulled out in any way. And I would just offer a suggestion that there might be a section completely devoted to our senior equity, because it's a big issue.
Thank you for that.
Go ahead, Dan Nelson.
I just wanted to add really quickly that Brian, Melanie, Sarah, and I also just recently gave a presentation to some regional planning commission staff and some Vermont Department of Health staff around strategies to handle pushback that folks are experiencing around health equity and integrating health equity into their work. So if that's something that feels relevant to you or might be helpful to you or your municipality, definitely let us know and we can have a discussion or share that presentation as well. Just wanted to add that.
Thank you for that.
Brian, how does this work with specifics? We had the example of the curb cutoff, and that's important. But, you know, have you seen another example that we aren't applying here in Vermont that could be applied? Maybe something as detailed and similar to that. You know, one of my pet peeves I find is seeing we create a brand new Market Street in South Burlington and created on-street parking for that. It just didn't seem like a health equity issue to allow parking right in front of existing parking lots when the sidewalks were constrained and are in fact unusable at this point due to construction. But, you know, the bike lanes were minimized despite a heroic effort by our Bike and Ped committee to try and get a cycle track and things of that sort to make it more acceptable. Any thoughts in that area?
Yes, you know, I think one of the things that cities and towns try to do when they are considering changes that, you know, reallocating public rights of way or curb to curb width that will better accommodate people using different modes. And on-street parking is one use of that public right of way. And, you know, as you know, and many of you know, becomes an emotional issue of where we park our cars, where we store them. And if we can't store them on the street, where do we store them if we don't have a driveway, where there aren't enough spaces? But if people who are taking transit or walking and biking then don't have space. If cars are parked on the street, they don't have their own space in which to safely navigate. So that is a particular issue and very interesting that is addressed. And I think if we want to make the most of what we have without moving curbs or getting into really expensive projects, we have to have those community conversations and better understand what the needs are and what the future might hold for people. I'm also thinking of green infrastructure as a way that, you know, to manage stormwater as a part of our public works, but also it can create this visually appealing environment as we are walking around that uses native plants and materials. So to me, that's another example of sort of that public infrastructure that has multiple benefits.
Great. Garrett?
I just wanted to toss out a little factoid. Japan does not allow on-street parking.
Thank you. I was half tempted to mention that, but I didn't want to get to it. But yes, I do think that, you know, when you talk about dense communities and they were talking about the community and connectedness, that we've seen businesses reclaim parking spaces in front of their spots, but that's more for a capitalistic thing. How can we recreate or reclaim spots that have been built up over the last 50 years for a privilege, if you will, you know, in dense communities? Especially where we have a surfeit of them, at least in South Burlington around the U-Mall, that fills up maybe 2 times a year when parking spaces are used. But we have the Sears parking garage, which is only not used at this point. So there are opportunities, is I guess what I'm saying. And we certainly see with Winooski how parking there, Mike can probably speak to that, adds to the coffers of the town, but probably limits some of the more exciting opportunities right there in the central downtown, because people would like to be there, more people than the space I think allows. You know, if it was more space there for people, there would be more people out in it if the traffic wasn't running right through it, but that's a whole different matter. So anyhow, anyone else? All right. Well, thank you. And keep us on track again, Brian. When will we be doing? Is it February or October of this year as we wrap up the ECOS project as a whole? And the health equity update is coming together with the other 3 modules. Am I correct?
I'll let Taylor or someone more involved in the ECOS plan update than I answer your timeline question. But we, as your staff, are here to help your community work to infuse health equity in your different plans and bylaws and zoning and so on.
Thank you. And thank you, Ann Nelson, for the offer of helping to counter some of the pushback from whatever they may be. Taylor, can you give us the timeline again?
For ECOS, yeah, sure. So we're hoping to do targeted engagement for ECOS plan this spring. Hoping to wrap up that outreach effort June, July. The background will also be working on a couple things related to housing targets and regional future land use map, depending on what the legislature does. We'd hope to have kind of a public draft for the ECOS plan available by the end of summer, early next fall. We'll work through that draft, allow people to comment on it in the fall, then start the formal adoption process in January 2025 for adoption.
Okay. And reminding everybody, this is in effect our own county comprehensive plan, correct? Okay. And again, how many modules? I'm trying to keep a number in my head and I don't have it off the top of my head.
It's been a bit reorganized, Chris, since the last time the board saw it in November.
Yes.
So
that's why I'm trying to get a handle on the pieces. I know there are 3 big pieces, but there may be 5 if I'm...
People, place, prosperity were the kind of 3 themes we were working within.
Yes, that's what I was hanging on.
Yeah.
All right.
We've done away with the theme, so you'll be getting an ECOS plan update at the board meeting soon.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you again, Brian, and all for the work on that. And we're going to move to Ann Nelson, I believe, for draft code of conduct. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Let me try to share my screen. Sorry, I'm working on a new computer, so it's giving me a bit of a weird question. Okay, it's not letting me see what I'm sharing, so I'm going to share this screen, and if it's the wrong screen, somebody just tell me. It should be a presentation that... Oh. Sorry. Okay, now let's try. Okay, there we go. Okay, sorry about that.
It looks great from here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for bearing with me. I did not expect that. Okay, so you all have seen kind of a preliminary idea of updating the code of conduct has come through the board. Today, the goal is to walk through an actual kind of outline of a draft that we have at this point. The goal is there will be a version that applies to staff members, and there will be a separate version that applies to board members. This outline we're walking through tonight is just for staff. But come the end of the presentation, I'm happy to talk about kind of where it differs for board members. And once I send drafts out for everyone to review, you'll get both versions. So obviously there will be plenty of differences between the two and also some similarities. So clarifying that. So you have seen this slide, but just to kind of reground everyone in what we're working on and what I've been working on. On the left, CCRPC has a mission statement, it has a vision statement. We may eventually update those if we update our bylaws, but we're not there at the moment. So this kind of additional foundational piece that we've been working on is 1, the equity commitment statement, which you all have seen and adopted. And then the second piece, which is core values and a code of conduct, which is really focused on our internal culture. How are we behaving? What are standards and expectations we're going to hold one another and ourselves accountable to, so that we can carry forward with our work in the way that we hope to. And then part 3 of this will be the equity action plan, which is like a strategic plan, which is, what does the actual work look like? And that's when I'm sure everybody will be very excited to actually see that. Okay. So again, why update the code of conduct? Our code of conduct was relatively outdated and fairly punitive. And there was no language or very little language in terms of what we are aspiring to. So even when it's unspoken, culture is cultivated. So can we take a step back and be intentional about the culture we want to cultivate internally at CCRPC before we start to think and reflect on the work we do externally? To clearly outline expectations of those who represent CCRPC, whether it's staff, board members, committee members. This provides structure and also, again, allows for accountability. And then 3, clarity in the gray space between no conflict and harassment or discrimination. This came from our existing code of conduct, very clearly outlines unlawful behavior, which includes harassment and discrimination. But 99, maybe more than that % of the time, conflict is not considered harassment or discrimination. It might be something far more minor. And so what do we do in that area? Taylor is upset because I said something that offended him, or I continually do something that offends him. How can he and I kind of work to resolve that conflict? For assurance that poor conduct will be addressed. And then lastly, it provides us with somewhat of a backbone, which we can make value-driven organizational decisions. So the timeline here, back in October of 2023, we all CCRPC staff started working together in small groups to think about developing organizational values and kind of reflecting on our code of conduct. There was an equity advisory committee meeting at the end of October where we discussed code of conduct. And actually before October, which is not on this list, we workshopped with the equity advisory committee values. November, I really kind of focused on research and attending webinars and connecting with other folks involved in kind of restorative practices, learning about how we could integrate restorative practices into internal HR policies. So some webinars, meetings, and then research into other organizations, public or private, who have tried to integrate restorative justice into HR or codes of conduct. December, nothing really happens in December. January, the draft came to the executive committee. We're now here today. I will send out PDF or Word versions of the draft by the end of this week for everyone to review, and hopefully we'll bring a final code of conduct to you all in February. After that, we'll really focus on training and implementation. So I'm hoping to have some staff members from Burlington's Community Justice Center come do training around kind of restorative dialogue and some more implementation pieces that we'll talk about in a bit. Just really quickly, some resources that I leaned on to pull language, our existing personnel policy, bylaws. There's some conflict of interest language in our bylaws already. We have a board member handbook that you all have seen, so I pulled some language from there. Charlie shared a 2007 strategic plan that interestingly had some values-driven language. Community Justice Center resources, some online resources that I found, and then other organizations who are willing to share with me their codes of conduct. So NRPC, Emerge Vermont, the Essex Westford School District, Howard Center, United Health, small and large. And then obviously staff and equity advisory committee input. Okay, so after lots of conversation, the 4 values that we have landed on are these 4: integrity, accountability, inclusion, and respect. So I'm going to run through each one. Integrity. As stewards of public resources, we recognize and hold our responsibility to serve our communities with humility, We adhere to our moral and ethical principles, behave honestly and fairly, and earn trust through our actions. Accountability, we own and make visible to ourselves, to one another, and to our communities, our individual and institutional work and impact. We welcome and are responsive to reflection and feedback with a continued commitment to improving. Inclusion, we collaborate and share power with one another and those impacted by our work, inviting, welcoming, and elevating difference in knowledge and experience. Relationships are at the center of what we do, and we create the time and space needed to nurture them. And respect. We lead with an ethic of care and treat every individual with respect and dignity. We choose our words carefully, seek to understand other perspectives, and behave in ways that support and empower others. We acknowledge the humanity in one another, and when we mess up, we tend to our impact, forgive, and keep showing up. Okay. So in the code of conduct, you'll see when I send it out, beneath each value, there's kind of a list of behaviors framed in a positive light that kind of exemplify that value. And this came from some other codes of conduct that I saw and I really liked that got more specific. It's like, okay, great, we're holding and honoring and seeking to uphold this value. What does that actually look like? And trying to make it more specific to our work. So I'm not going to read through all of these for the sake of time, but when you get the document version, we try to get a little more specific with behaviors beneath each value. And most of these came out of conversation with Equity Advisory Committee members or staff. And lastly, respect. So again, you'll see these in more detail with the version that I send out. I think it was in the last board meeting when we talked about code of conduct that somebody, Dana, it might have been you, who mentioned how much you like to forgive and show grace. Anyways, that's still here. Okay. So beyond those kind of behavioral expectations, then we move to more general staff-specific like work expectations. And so I pulled behavioral or content in our personnel policy that felt code of conduct-y, so it was behavior-oriented, into this document. We currently have hours of work, and we just updated this language and added a little bit of new language, kind of finessing details. It was outdated. So 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day, flexible work schedule. We added remote work, so long as it does not impact the performance or quality of work. And the executive director kind of holds the right to rescind this privilege if the performance of someone's work is compromised by remote work. Dress code, business casual, and then we've added a sentence about no restriction based on sex or gender expression. Technology use with discretion. Staff are required to use a CCRPC computer, and all work-related communication is subject to the Freedom of Information Act. There was a sentence added about personal cell phone use because it used to be more common to use, the work phones that are sitting on people's desks, and now most people use their personal cell phones for work, which is fine, but they're subject to FOIA in that case. Pets at work, this was in the previous personnel policy. Driving at work. And then some content around education, training, and professional development expectations there, and also what CCRPC will support and cover financially. So that language was a little bit updated. Conflict of interest. Most of this language stayed the same. It outlines, financial interests, acceptance of gifts or other benefits, personal relationships and hiring, and what you're allowed to do in terms of outside activities and employment. The outside activities and employment is really, we'll get to political conflict of interest in just a second, but mostly like at the discretion of the executive director. And if the executive director thinks that it's getting in the way of a staff member's ability to do their job, then it becomes a problem. But otherwise, this language mostly stayed the same. Political activity. So CCRPC is covered by the Hatch Act because we're publicly funded, and the Hatch Act is it's a federal law that outlines what public employees can and cannot do. So below is political activity that's not allowed by CCRPC employees. So we're not allowed to partake in partisan political activity within CCRPC's office, engage in political activity, including on social media while we're at work, or wearing official, this language changed in the document, but wearing CCRPC logos or representing CCRPC in any way. We're not allowed to run for public office in partisan elections. We can't use our authority or influence to interfere with or affect the results of an election. We can't directly or indirectly coerce contributions from subordinates in support of a political party or candidate at work. We can't solicit political contributions. This one gets a little fuzzy. We can't solicit political contributions from others to political or invite subordinate employees to political events or suggest they engage in political activity. We may do so to nonprofit organizations so long as the organization is not associated with a partisan candidate of a political activity or a political activity. We can't knowingly encourage or discourage political activity, and we can't participate in unlawful conduct.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Can I interrupt
go ahead.
with a question? Hi.
Yeah, please.
I was wondering on the previous slide, so staff cannot run for public office in partisan elections. So, like in most Vermont towns, like running for the select board or the planning commission, you don't run as a Democrat or Republican or whatever. Is that what you're referring to? Is it where you're sort of declaring a party?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, thanks for asking. We are allowed to, I don't know where the bullet points went on this slide, but we are allowed to express opinions about political issues and partisan groups or candidates while we are not at work or using official authority. Share opinions on personal social media accounts outside of work hours. This is language that was added in terms, it was not in the previous policy because social media was not really a thing back then. We can run for public office in nonpartisan elections. We can campaign for and hold office in political clubs and organizations on our own time outside of work. Actively campaign for candidates for public office, contribute money to political organizations and candidates. So all of this is allowed outside of CCRPC work hours and while we are not representing CCRPC. Participate in protests and rallies as long as it's on your own time and not wearing a CCRPC logo or insignia that makes it appear that you are participating on behalf of CCRPC. Some additional social media has kind of brought up this issue, and so some other codes of conduct have started to flesh out like what counts as free speech and what one is allowed to do. So this is federal language. As a general matter, speech is protected if you're speaking as a private citizen, if you're speaking about a matter of public concern, and your speech does not interfere with your job. However, speech, even if on your own time, may not be protected if it crosses a line into a real threat, an incitement to imminent unlawful action, or becomes part of a pattern of discriminatory harassment, which we have a definition of later. So it can't disrupt your ability to perform your workplace duties or disrupt an efficient workplace. So the court uses the language that this depends on factors such as time, manner, place, and the extent of disruption. We have kind of a general list of unacceptable behavior, some of which came from the previous personnel policy, some of which was added. Again, it's kind of we can't outline all behavior that's unacceptable. Certainly we can legally unacceptable behavior, but I think it's more important to focus on what we're striving towards and then outline a process for managing conflict when it comes up, because you never know what behaviors from somebody else might cause harm. But there's certainly unacceptable behavior that is severe enough that it might bypass any kind of restorative process and requires like immediate action be taken. So just some examples of behavior that might be severe enough to bypass any other process. And obviously all the unlawful discrimination, harassment, drug use, kind of the legal expectations certainly fall in this category. Yeah, discrimination, harassment, sexual harassment, alcohol and substance use. So the next kind of piece of the code of conduct is about implementation and accountability. So how are we going to take this code of conduct and kind of feed it into our workplace culture and environment? So it's not just a document that's sitting on our website or in emails or wherever it's sitting and nobody reads it. So there will be, upon hire, a signed acknowledgement of receipt and review, and then every year, staff members and board members will have to re-sign a commitment to this code of conduct. There will be onboarding and orientation for new staff members, also new board members and new committee members. What is the culture we are trying to cultivate? What are the expectations? Here's what you do if you perceive of harm, if you feel like you've been harmed, or if there's conflict that you think needs to be dealt with. This recognition and feedback is how do we integrate the practice of feedback into CCRPC's culture and into our meeting culture? So can we open up space at the beginning of meetings, at the end of meetings, to allow for folks to reflect and bring up any thoughts, constructive criticism, appreciating folks for what they do, like just kind of slowing down and allowing that space to reflect on behavior so that we can all learn and grow. We have annual performance evaluations already, so we'll update this process to kind of align with this new code of conduct. We had a staff recognition award. I don't know whether this will stay or leave. We haven't done it for quite some time, I don't think, but could bring it back. And then workshops and trainings. So there may be on any given year any number of workshops or training around creating cultures of inclusion, around conflict resolution, around how to weave values into the work we do, etc. And then public meetings. This came up in staff meetings about maybe making it a practice at all public meetings to share our organizational values so that the public can also help hold us accountable to upholding those values in our work. And maybe we create a set of ground rules that is some, we kind of pick and choose behavioral expectations from each value to have ground rules that we open up public meetings with. And that way it kind of sets the tone for how we expect the public to act and how the public can also expect us to act. Helps make this kind of desired culture more visible. Okay, and then getting into the conflict resolution and discipline kind of process. In the previous personnel policy, the process that was outlined was the kind of classic punitive. You do something wrong, you file a complaint or report it, and then the executive director decides what to do, and that's kind of it. This quote at the top: accountability could be a more restorative justice approach as opposed to an approach of canceling, engaging. We have to give people the grace to make mistakes. I think this is especially true today. Conflict, as everybody knows, is an inherent part of collaborative work. It's an inherent part of any relationship, workplace or beyond. Our success depends on our ability to move through it and learn from it. We seek to be transformative, trauma-informed, prioritize dialogue, and foster learning and development. We integrate restorative justice practices and principles, and we also recognize its limits. So quickly, what is restorative justice? It's a way of addressing harm and conflict that focuses on repairing relationships and restoring dignity, rather than punishing or blaming. It requires participation of everyone affected by the harm, whether that's the person who caused it or the person who received it, in respectful and constructive dialogue. And it works to ensure that offenders take responsibility for their action, to understand the harm that they've caused, and to give an opportunity to redeem themselves and to discourage them from causing further harm. Why often when workplace conflict occurs that results in punishment, the conflict doesn't disappear. So how can we instead focus on healing the relationship? Two different views of conflict in the workplace. On the left, the kind of traditional process, misconduct is seen as a violation of a policy. That violation creates guilt, and justice requires the company to determine blame and impose a punishment. In the restorative model, misconduct is a violation of people and relationships. It creates obligations, and justice involves all stakeholders in the conflict to repair the relationship. So the process would look something like this. Step one would be report. And I've tried to outline, there was some staff confusion over who to report to, depending on who the conflict is with. So if it's staff on staff, if Brian has an issue with me, if I have an issue with somebody else, we can go to the executive director or a supervisor. This supervisor piece was added because in case staff don't feel comfortable going directly to the executive director. So that would be a program manager. So Eleni, Taylor, Forrest. If staff has a complaint against the executive or with the executive director, the executive committee would be who the staff member would go to. There's also a line that says if you don't feel comfortable going directly to the executive committee, you can go to a supervisor in order to report to the executive committee for you, because I know that not all staff members have relationships with the executive committee. Staff to a board member, also executive committee. Staff to a committee member, also executive committee, but the executive director needs to be informed. Board member to the executive director would also be the executive committee. Board member, staff, also executive director or executive director. And then committee member and staff member would be executive director. So anyways, just making it very clear, like who do you report to? And if you don't feel comfortable going to that person, is there a second option? Step two would be investigate and discuss. So if the harm is minor enough that involved parties feel like maybe they feel like they can handle it on their own and they don't actually report, that's great. If you report and even still parties feel like they are willing and open to go through a restorative justice process, that would be ideal. If not, or if the harm is so great that restorative justice process doesn't make sense, or one of the parties is not willing to, then it would move to the formal discipline procedure. Out of that comes action, could be anything from dialogue to apology, training, warning, suspension, request resignation, or forced removal. And then this additional step of follow-up. So how can we kind of revisit and make sure that all involved parties are feeling okay a month later, 3 months later, 6 months later, depending on the severity of the harm. So the restorative justice process, report or handle it directly, you identify, investigate the harm, you invite participants into dialogue, and then there are guidelines for how to host restorative dialogue. So there will be resources shared in this code of conduct to do so if you want to do a self-facilitated process. And that's what I'm hoping to have the Community Justice Center come in and do training around. If you don't feel comfortable handling it one-on-one or directly with the other involved party, it could be mediated by a supervisor, the executive director, or the executive committee. This, of course, too, would require some education and training. And then the third option is to bring in a Community Justice Center staff. And so they provide conflict assistance coaching, restorative dialogue facilitation, and also mediation services. they are willing and actually quite excited to be included in this code of conduct as a resource to lean on. Coming out of that, you would agree on follow-up actions and then follow-up. So this is where a lot of the restorative justice research has gone into finding different resources around how to bring these principles into kind of internal HR staff-on-staff dialogue. And then the formal discipline procedure is pretty straightforward. This was in the previous personnel policy. You report, whoever you report to investigates, and then whoever you report to decides on the action that ought to be taken. So typically it's either the executive director or the executive committee, depending on who the involved party is. And then again, adding that follow-up step. And then there's a formal grievance procedure if a staff has a complaint against CCRPC as an organization or a complaint against, a decision that was made. And this is a bit of a more formal process that's outlined that I won't read fully through. And then, okay, let me pause there and see if folks have questions or comments, and then I'll do a brief other equity update.
If I can barge in, and Nelson, just to be recapping what we just read in the last few slides here. The restorative justice process is outside of or separate from the formal discipline procedure, correct? So the two branches as they go. So we're just having the whole employee handbook, if you will, here in front of me. I was losing focus here in the last three slides. So I just wanted to be clear that those two were hopefully separate, and most of the work would be done in the restorative justice process, which is exciting. It's something that's been working very well, at least in South Burlington, I believe. And the formal discipline procedure then comes to the chair of the EC in some form or fashion with a written decision, which unfortunately I'm familiar with in our Board of Civil Authority procedures in town. So thank you for clarifying that. So let me get to Garrett, who had his hand up first. Go ahead.
On the different levels, whether it's staff with the ED, which, I certainly understand people having differences with Charlie. That was a joke, Charlie. One that I didn't see in there, and I know this is focused on staff, is board member to board member.
Yeah.
I think that should have a route defined at some point, because that kind of conflict can happen.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry that was not included.
I think you had said that you're working on the board one upcoming. You haven't gotten that yet, have you?
Yeah, it's mostly finished. I just didn't want to completely overwhelm everybody with both versions in today's presentation.
And I figured you might well be in that, but I just thought I'd toss it out in case it was missed.
Yeah, thank you for flagging that.
Benjamin?
Yeah, thank you very much. Great presentation. I just had a couple of questions and comments about, I guess it's page 26 of the 31 on the juxtaposition that you present as traditional process versus restorative justice. I'm afraid I have to take issue because misconduct under the traditional process of tagging misconduct as a violation of policy. Not merely, it's really, there are very specific statutes and regulations that are far more than mere policy, and it's through democratic process. So to kind of dismiss that, I have a little, I'd be glad to talk to you about perhaps some additional language or fleshing that out, certainly simply giving it a little more recognition, because we have a legal system that's based on precedent and that you can rely on precedent, and there's a reason for it. And so I wouldn't
I find it a little dismissive to suggest that misconduct is a mere violation of policy. The other thing is violations create guilt. The legal system isn't only about guilt, it is about holding people accountable, and that's what we're trying to do. I admire and I endorse, I think it's a great idea to try to find other avenues to get people in a workplace to work together and be more equitable. I think that's great. But when you talk about on the restorative justice side, suggesting that violations create obligations, well, in fact, those obligations are and need to be, and thank God they are, based in statute and regulation, and the policy that's brought together as a matter of organizational requirements. It's the obligations are there already. Violations, I think we might, especially where we're trying to put things right, involving the stakeholders in the conflict, that should, I mean, that's quite frankly the law of how federally financed and federal organizations are supposed to be operating already. But the idea is that violations create actually consequences, and how we arrive at those consequences, or ensuring that consequences are felt for violative behavior, sexual harassment, discrimination, and the like. These are very, very rich fields of study. So I appreciate the effort, and there's a lot of effort here, and it shows. But these are some fundamentals that maybe we need to look at a little more. And I'd be glad to work with you to do that.
That's good.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
It does sound a bit like your word choice. I think, Ben, what's striking is that the misconduct has consequences, would be a starting point for what you're trying to say. Is that correct? Yes.
You're talking to me? Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
But how will we resolve it? I think that's really the nice part.
Sure. Yeah, and so I appreciate what you're saying, because it isn't as linear as it looks. Bruce, did you have a thought there?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you, Benjamin, for those comments, and thank you, Ann Nelson, for this presentation. It's incredible. When you came on board, I asked that with Charlie, could we look at the code of conduct and maybe amend to it? And I mean, you just took it and you just ran with it, and you built the committees and you talked to the staff, and not yet to the board as well, but your EAC helped you create the code of conduct to where you are, and you did a lot of studies, your own due diligence you did, working with organizations and community to find out how their code of conduct is, and so you can find, if you couldn't find them but a word, how you can implement it in what we're trying to do. And so I appreciate that. I know all the work you've been doing, because we talking on this. I know all the work you do, and you report out anyways. But this is where I feel like I'm the best at for the board and for EAC, is the work that you're doing, and Nelson, and I think this is my worth. And so I want to ask you too and thank you, of course. And I also asked that you look at the restorative justice about how individuals should be make amends to the community or individuals who they might have offended. And you look through CJC, which I'm a founding member of the Community Justice Centers around the state. So I appreciate you doing that work with Rachel Jolly and others, and who might come in and help us do some learn more. And so I would ask you also to work with Vermont Human Rights Commission, Big Hartman. We do those trainings. I'm a commissioner for the state of Vermont for the Human Rights Commission. And I'll ask for you to contact her and ask her as well. As far as also, when you use the words, back in your slides, you use the word humanity, respect of humanity. And I'm wondering if, does that mean cultures too? Or just, what does the humanity mean? I know what humanity means, but I mean, is it, I think, the way the world is today and we think and how important it is. I think, it's tough for us to, people like me who don't know about all the laws and rules and how the cultures, what I'm saying? That's so important. I don't understand a lot of things like some of my people might understand it because that's their culture. Like a lot of people don't understand what African American is. Might not understand about slavery. And being segregated or these type of things that happens through my generation. And so it's hard to speak on that. But I think when you say humanities, you got you got to understand all the cultures and what that means and how people live and how they was brought up and why you can understand more about why the way the world is now. But I think we're not going to be able to do it like that. We're not going to be able to understand because we're not that person. But I think if you use the word of cultures, then that has a significant definition of what their culture is, definite wise. And also, there's a lot going on with our code of conducts and the rules books and everything. I mean, you got to have it, right? So much, I think that with our RPC mission goals and objectives, and I think we live by our mission goals and objectives and our bylaws. I think that we'll be everybody be all right, to the minimum. It's hard, like. I don't know the bylaws for RPC either, but I think that's a charter of how we were designed and what we're supposed to be doing. And our mission goals and objectives of our organization is same, as well as if we live by what our job descriptions are. We stay within our job descriptions, then that's numero uno. So all of these things are so important, that you're doing, and there's just so much. I feel like, people do a lot of times. Like we look at people who do like 99% of the things they do incredible. Then one thing they do wrong, good, boy, we about to throw them out to the wolves, whatever. It's crazy. So I think we should come up with a little bit some more like appreciation awards. I know we got some things like thank God it's Friday award or something, but I think we gotta show more appreciation to the people to just kind of figure out what's a more appreciation thing than what we do with RPC, and give more people let them feel more the worth that they are, the strength that they have, and this like the code of conduct and the decisions that they make. And so there it is. That's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Ann Nelson, I want to recognize Dana. She had her hand up, and thank you, Bruce. Go ahead, Dana.
Yeah, and great job. The document really reflects a lot of hard and good work, very thorough. And I'm a little bit of a word nerd, so kind of like Bruce, he picked up on humanity, and it's further up in the document, in terms of how staff interacts with each other. But I was interested in the use of the word humility. And how is that different from like the use of the word respect there? What does interacting with humility mean to you?
Yeah, good question. It came up. So humility, the word humility is in the description for integrity, which came up a lot in conversations around how we hold our work. So we hold our expertise with humility. We hold our experience, our credibility, our solutions, our actions, our projects, our work with humility, so that we can continuously grow and improve and be open to learning. In my mind, at least, and maybe this is worthy of some more thought, that was more work-centered. And the respect was, at the end of the day, we respect one another, which also involves humility. And like this got so fuzzy because there is so much overlap when you get into these like fluffy value words. Like so many of them kind of also mean the others. So I think you're right in that, in order to respect one another, you also hold humility, and to do one's work respectfully would also require you to be humble. But yeah, it came from the phrase, we hold our expertise with humility. We hold our, what does it say? We recognize and hold our responsibility to serve our communities with humility. We are going to try our best and we're open to learn. and to improve and to change. But definitely curious if you or if other folks have thoughts or reflections on the values or the descriptions to please share, because the words do get a little messy.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Dana. Ben, did you have any other thoughts? I wanted to try and get to.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Elaine has her hand up.
Elaine, go ahead. I'm not good at seeing hands these days.
I gotta change the color of my hand. Nobody ever sees it.
It blends in with that picture that is in your background. That's the
Either
problem.
that or I have to take the picture down. Exactly. I just wanted to address the excuse me, the question that Benjamin had regarding misconduct. Definitely recognize that there are parts of that there is misconduct that rises to an illegal level, and I don't think the intention of the code of conduct is to replace any and all discipline, regardless of the severity of the infraction, with a restorative process. I think that perhaps the code of conduct could address that with some additional language, just to say, notwithstanding all of the restorative efforts we're making, if an illegal activity occurs, legal remedies will be sought. But more, this is to address the day-to-day cultural and behavioral aspects of working together, where people rub each other the wrong way. Misconduct is defined differently by many people. So this is more of that lower level cultural, but by no means were we trying to say that we will not pursue legal avenues should illegal activity occur, in whatever form that would take.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. We've been hearing other arguments from it. Bruce, you have a final thought?
Yes, I forgot. I see on my paper. I forgot one. Ann Nelson, and I was, you went over got a lot of information from other organizations about what they have written about their code of conduct, and I don't know if I heard you say the code of conduct. Like, maybe you can give one from like Outright Vermont, their code of conduct. That'd be that. I think that'd be incredible. So if you could try to see if they have a code of conduct within their manual, employees manual or whatever, that'd be cool. Thank you.
That's great. I think that's 2 recommendations you've offered her for resources. And I was often wondering how the consultant had been factored in, and I think you had indicated, Ann Nelson, that we were getting some consultation with their specific named individual. But Mark Heyman was another person mentioned. Is he HR, a different consultant who had reviewed?
He's the consultant that recently helped update our harassment and discrimination language. So we will work with him to make sure that all the language in this code of conduct is legally compliant and, checks all the boxes it needs to. Which also, Ben, addresses your comment a little bit, and to Elaine's, like, certainly consequences will exist, and especially for conduct that is illegal. So yes, we will be working with Mark Heyman. Is the HR consultant that we worked with previously.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, it seems like this runs into a 300-page employee handbook for all the things it's trying to comprehensively cover. And thank you. It really is tough. Are there other thoughts? I do want to check in, like I said, with Mike Bryan before he disappears in about 3 minutes. Mike, are you there?
I am here.
Yes, I didn't want to miss you. I know you said you had a 7:30 deadline, but we were coming up on item 9. Is there anything in item 9 that you had thoughts on, or that falls in your lap? Or is it you're more on the EAC and this code of conduct that you've
item 9. I think that I'm no longer board development committee chair. I think that's now
my confusion. I didn't want to lose you before anything that fell in that area, but thank you.
No, I appreciate that, and thank you, Ann Nelson, for this presentation. It was very good.
And thank you for your work on the EAC, Mike. Appreciate it. So,
sure.
If there's nothing else on the draft code of conduct. As you say, you're going to work towards a board thing, and Nelson, once this gets put together, we'll just move on to your equity update. Is there anything else going on in the EAC?
Oops, hold on. Yes, I know. Sorry, you have to hear from me some more. Okay, very quickly, some other equity updates. Equity Advisory Committee. I am working on kind of revisiting membership of that committee. So reaching out to some additional folks, trying to get new members to join. We don't already have representation from. In that, I'm trying to get some youth members to join. So talking to Burlington High School and Winooski High School to try and see if they have students who might be interested in joining. Anyways, for of interest to you all, I know that Jackie and Elaine and Mike, who have all been a part of the EAC, Jackie and Elaine both have to step back this next year, which kind of sparked this question in my mind of would it make sense to have board members kind of rotate through being members of the Equity Advisory Committee. And so maybe we have 2 or 3 board members each year who try to join meetings and participate. So I just want to plant that seed. If anybody's interested, reach out to me, let me know. And we can continue that conversation. Our next meeting is on January 31st. It's going to be in person. We're doing, I'm partnering with the State of Vermont's Climate Action Office, and we're going to do a climate action focus group to help inform the state's climate action plan, which will also inform our ECOS plan. ECOS public engagement, there are a lot of preparation for that's happening now. That will really take place throughout the spring. The equity action plan has consistently kind of been a work in progress in the background, so that will come to you all at some point. Draft is mostly finished. Charlie, Ben, and myself are all participating in the statewide EPIC program that's hosted by the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. It stands for Ethical Performance Improvement Campaign, and it's really about creating cultures of inclusion. I'm sure you all are aware of it. Many municipalities have participated or are participating this year. So they opened it up to regional planning staff, which is great. And then still kind of starting up new coaching work for the year. So working a little less with the creative discourse group who CCRPC has been working with over the past few years, and brought on one additional coach every once in a while, a woman by the name of Siri Russell. She's a professor down at the University of Virginia, but she served in a very similar role to mine for a county down in Virginia and did a really phenomenal job. So she has some more hands-on planning knowledge, which I'm hoping will be helpful. Okay.
Well, thank you. And before Jeff reminds me, we have an open public forum on the UPWP for the fiscal year 2025. That's next year. And we'd like to see if there are any members of the public who would still like to comment on the UPWP or Unified Planning Work Program for next fiscal year. Hearing and seeing none, I would accept the motion to close the public comment forum.
Also move.
Thank you, Andy of Williston. And thank you, Andy of Burlington. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. And
aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining, please speak up.
Yeah, there we go.
Was that an aye or a negative?
Yeah, that's an aye there.
Right.
I forgot to unmute.
Thank you, Catherine. All right. So we're going to move to item 9, a charge to the Board Development Committee to review and update bylaws. Garrett, I'm trying, forgive me for not knowing who's, Catherine, you are the chair, are you not?
Yes,
Okay.
immediate past chairs gets to chair the Board Development Committee.
So
it works out because I've been on the Board Development Committee since the beginning, so.
I was going to have Charlie correct me, but this is administrative fiat, is it not? I just charge you, Catherine, to review and update our bylaws with your committee for the MPO or Metropolitan Planning Organization's voting review. As discussed by Garrett earlier, we're looking to have you look at the weighting for the votes, where Burlington gets 4, by example, and South Burlington might get 2, and most of the other towns might get 1, and whether that might need to be changed. The vision and mission statement aligned with the EAC's work and Nelson's work. The conflict of interest and code of conduct, again, through the EAC work and Nelson's work, as we've just seen. And then the committee appointments, especially the Equity Advisory Committee and other committee appointments and duties and such. That seems to be most of the charge. Garrett, I'm going to ask you to chime in.
I just wanted to mention that I have been remiss. I had planned to bring something about MPO voting to the executive committee, but I took on 4 new clients this fall and winter, and I've been swamped. But I will get my stuff together, so to speak, and bring it to the committee, because I have been doing some research into this. For example, only 13% of MPOs in the US have weighted voting. I'm not suggesting that we change it to unweighted, by the way. So don't worry, Jeff. But I do have some thoughts about how we might, and I'm going to steal a term here, make MPO stuff more equitable for all towns in the county. So, Catherine, you'll be hearing from me. Sorry.
Well, very good, and you're probably on target with your research. Thank you, Garrett, because it wasn't that long ago that we had 6 senators representing a lot of Chittenden County, and that was an anomaly if you looked around the 50 states for the way it had been configured. So thankfully, I think the legislature has finally redone that one.
I like the old way, but that's all right.
It was an oddity that was not shared elsewhere. Let's just leave it there.
But Vermonters be different? On that note, anyway, I will mute myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other items that I need to add to the charge?
Well, we have talked about this at the executive committee, is actually to look at completely absorbing the finance committee as part of the executive committee. We've been kind of working like that for a few years, but we've talked about it. It's one of my little tickler lists that we had. It's also the board committee, board development should look at that, to how to just incorporate the finance committee rather than have it all separate.
The EF committee.
Yeah.
The executive finance committee, in effect.
Exactly.
Okay. Not that I want to coin a new term yet. Any other?
We've acted like it's the same, but technically they were 2 separate committees and they used to meet separately. And then, the finance committee then would be reported through the treasurer or secretary treasurer, but now, it's all part of the same committee. So we might as well look at whether that needs to be changed or not.
Super. Anything else that needed to be added to the charge, Charlie? Jeff?
No, it just looks like to me that we're going to need to take some things that are in the process of being developed and incorporate them into bylaws and things of that nature. So
I can't give you a deadline of next month.
Yeah, right. Or 3 months after the work product of that's needed to make the decisions comes through, something like that.
Is it appropriate to give a deadline?
You can give a deadline. The work will go to fill the space provided by the deadline. And it may affect whether or not, Mr. Chair, you like it or whether Garrett's going to like it.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. It does sound like the work is in progress, but it isn't going to be something instant for sure. So I would hope that we could get something a year from now. Is that too far out of reach, Charlie?
Yeah, no, and thanks, Chris. And Catherine, I haven't had a chance to talk to you, but I was, and Jeff, to your point, I was thinking this is probably a full 2024, during this course of this calendar year, because, and you're right, the code of conduct that work is, hopefully wrapping up in the next couple months, but we'll need to go through some process to develop, or decide if we want to edit the mission and vision statement. So there's more there. There's quite a bit to discuss. I think it's going to take many months. So I was kind of hoping we would finish by the end of the year.
Then there's always the question about what we want to be a convention and what we want to reduce to writing in the bylaws to actually have to happen.
Yeah.
So there may be some differences between what are good things to do versus what things that we feel to execute our mission we have to do, which should be memorialized in the bylaws. It's always interesting when we rewrite bylaws. I think, Catherine, this is my third round on it.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's my second anyway, at least. So
I've been part of it a few times as well.
Well, great. Then you are so charged, Catherine. How's that?
Thank you.
The action is done. Charlie, I'm going to turn it over to you for Chair Executive Director's updates.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So just a couple major topics. The legislature's back in session. Is it, I don't know, a week and a half, 2 weeks now? And sorry, I feel like a broken record. We had been working on Act 250 studies, S100, those housing bill studies. We've had the chance to present them to House Environment and Senate Economic Development. I think those two committees, potentially Senate Environment, are taking up that work from those study committees. So I'll keep you posted every month as to how things are progressing. Obviously, they're just digesting that work from the summer. And there are a couple other bills that I'm kind of closely watching. One, we've talked about open meeting law requirements and whether we can have meetings like this anymore after June. And the other one is maybe somewhat related to the permitting stuff, which is there's a bill S213 where they are talking about whether the state should take over floodplain and river corridor regulation to make it consistent and enforced consistently statewide. I think A&R just testified this morning that would take like 20 staff. So if you staff us appropriately, we could do it. So anyway, there's going to be a debate about that kind of thing. There's 200 something more bills got introduced. But so if you see one that's starting to move and you think I should be paying attention to it, please let me know. Otherwise, please, I don't know if anybody has any questions about anything happening in the legislature so far. It's been very introductory the last week or two.
One thing I do want to point out, I read that they are looking at some help for statewide ethics, specifically where we just talked about you and Ben and Nelson with the EPIC program. I'm not sure they quite cross over because they're probably at two different forms of ethics, but I think this is more for smaller municipalities that may not have the support. Is that correct? Have you heard of that?
I'm sorry. Are you referring to Ann Nelson's mention of the EPIC program?
Yeah, they're two different things. I understand.
That's around equity.
Yes.
The ethics, there was a recommendation that came out that we should have some more rules and a process for reviewing municipal ethics complaints. So that I don't know where that's going. I'll kind of make a note that you'd like me to pay a little attention to what's happening with that. So
I foresee another Secretary of State's ombudsman on the topic, as I say, primarily for the smaller towns that don't necessarily have the resources or focus for those things, or investigative journalism on the ground, as they might in Burlington and so on.
Yep.
Thank you.
Charlie,
so let me know. Oh, sorry.
Charlie,
Yeah,
that brings to mind, my new community has a pretty clear conflict of interest policy. So I just want to make sure that there is some assessment of conflict of interest policies at the municipal level so that we don't get into a conflict situation between what we might have with RPC and our own individual communities. So I've already signed the conflict of interest policy in the town of Shelburne. So I would hate to have to sign something that's in conflict with that for my representation of my community on the RPC board.
Yeah. And
it's a little mini Act 250.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, you got your municipal rules and your regional rules, and then some state rules. Just so you know, how or why does that happen? It's because typically a federal agency, there's this federal conflict of interest guidance has kind of said, if you want federal money, you have to have this provision. And so that's why, hopefully, Jeff, they are all saying the same things because they are rooted in the same document. But that's a good cross check we need to do.
Yeah, sorry, really quickly.
Okay,
Jeff,
sorry.
would you mind sending that to me?
I can do that. It almost seems like we should start as a baseline with our own municipal conflict of interest policies, and then anything additionally that has to be covered so that we can do our federal funding, conflict of interest policy, and hopefully there's nothing that outright conflicts.
Yeah, that's a good point. We can do a double check with some of our towns in VLCT, and we do have a conflict of interest policy that's in our bylaws right now for board members, right? And I'm quite confident that was because we had some audit from an agency that says you need to have this and it needs to be in your bylaws, and it probably got in there 20 years ago. The language has been pretty similar, though. I don't think it's been evolving too much.
At least 20 years ago.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Someone else had a question? Dana, maybe?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the ending in June, the not being able to meet remotely.
Yeah.
And I'd be curious as to how that discussion is going to unfold, because it seems like getting all of us, public officials, in our cars, and transportation is the biggest factor in climate change. Let's just get on the road.
Yeah.
And it might be in conflict with a state energy plan. I think that's something that we need to consider.
To be clear, if the law does revert a bit, it would basically require a staff person or two to, be in our conference room with Bruce. Sorry, Bruce. And say, so it wouldn't require all the board members to come in.
Oh, okay.
It would require that we have a physical space that a person could show up to. And the Secretary of State is, I will say, pretty tightly bound to that position. But the reality is we very rarely now, it's easier for people to plug in than walk in, right? Or drive in and walk in. So, we'll see how that conversation goes. They may try to split the baby somehow. Maybe some organization or some types of organizations are allowed to be fully virtual and some aren't. I don't know. That might be one way they split the baby.
Thanks.
Any other legislative issues at the moment? Yeah, Catherine.
Yeah, I think with the meetings that the push on, if nothing else, if splitting the baby kind of thing, municipalities or even the RPC and stuff should be able to have fully virtual in the winter because of particularly given the weather we've had and stuff and the accidents that have happened on the road. It's a lot safer, not only the transportation and the gas and everything else, but just because you might go to a meeting and then come out and have to scrape off half an inch of ice, which is not fun.
Fair enough. So the other topic, just a staffing update. Eliana is here. I think we were in the hiring process for a transportation planner. Hey, Eliana, say hi. And we have a second employee that will be starting in 3 or 4 weeks in our business office, Trudy. So Chris, I'll probably have them be on the agenda for next month to do a little intro. Sorry, Eliana, you got lucky tonight.
Great. Hello and welcome.
Yeah. And then the other part, not only are we doing this code of conduct work, which is somebody kind of mentioned a significant portion of our personnel policy is captured in that code of conduct work. Another chunk is the compensation study. So we'll be kind of looking at salary ranges and benefits. And the executive committee will, be diving into that in more detail. They kind of act as our personnel committee also. So just to let you know, that's those two things are probably between the legislature and this kind of internal policy procedure work is probably the focus of, well, a lot of folks' time. Thank you, Ann Nelson. But definitely the focus of my time in the next 2 or 3 months. So let me know if there's any questions on that or any other questions. I leave that other there in case you have anything else that you want to ask me about. And then I'll stop asking. Chris, back to you.
All right. If nothing else, I'm going to draw your attention to item 11, where in your packet you have all the committee liaison activities and reports to wrap up 2023. Looking ahead, you have the bullet points after our next item of upcoming meetings. I'm going to draw your attention to the last bullet point, which is erroneously listed as our board meeting is on Wednesday, February 14th. That's incorrect. It's going to be Wednesday, February 21st. There's something else happening on Wednesday, February 14th. I'm reliably informed by my wife. So I hope you enjoy yourselves. With that in mind, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Thank you, Jeff, and a second from Garrett. And all those in favor, please say aye or hit the leave button and have yourself a wonderful January.
Yeah, thank you all. Have a good night. Thank you.
See you February 21st.
Take care, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.